What if I were to tell you there is one thing you can do that will decrease your compliance costs, such as attorney fees, consultants, and possible regulatory fines, and it doesn't take much time, and it will dramatically improve the effectiveness of your compliance management program? Learn more about it in our next episode of Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers.
Welcome to Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Prepare to learn something new about the industry that keeps us moving.
Check out all our podcast content on our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X. Welcome back to the podcast for what is another compliance-focused episode. And I always have to start these out with a disclaimer. I am not an attorney. I am not an attorney. No one here is an attorney. We do not provide legal advice. This is all just for your information. And if you have questions about this, this is stuff that you should definitely talk to your attorney about. It's all about bringing your attention to important compliance aspects with this business. So what is this one key thing that you can do that's going to decrease your compliance costs and make your compliance management program more effective? Well, that key step is doing self-audits. Now, self-audits are something that are really easy to overlook. This is one thing that we didn't do effectively ourselves in the dealership with our store. So we had a compliance management system. We had policies. We had ongoing education where we were, learning ourselves about our compliance issues, exposures, et cetera. We were consulting with attorneys, and then we were having employee training. But we didn't finish with an important final step there to validate the process. That is the self-audit. So regulatory audits, due diligence audits by our lenders would come up, and they would ask for deal jackets. They would take a sampling of deal jackets. They would look for the records for whatever the audit was covering, and we would get surprises. Oh my gosh, this was being done wrong. The wrong form was being used. We're missing something. We have gaps in our record retention. These are critical errors, and they are avoidable. They're avoidable if you're aware of the problem. And so you need to do audits of yourself. And the way to do it is you have to really put yourself in the shoes of the auditor and anticipate what they're going to be looking for. Do deal jacket verifications. Take a sampling. Pull deal jackets at random, making sure that you're covering all of your employees working in that department on occasion and looking at the deal jackets that they're packaging. If you have collections, you have collections audit responsibilities. Do a sampling of your collections management system records. Credit applications. Make sure you're getting a sampling of credit applications and looking for issues there. With these records, you want to make sure you're verifying against your retention schedules. Are you holding on to the stuff you're required to hold on to for as long as you're supposed to hold on to it? This can be a point of confusion amongst your employees. You need to have a well-established policy on record retention, what records need to be retained, how they need to be retained, whether in physical hard copy or in electronic form, or often both is a really good idea. You want to make sure that you have completeness of the record, and you want to have accurate compliance. Put yourself, again, in the shoes of that auditor and anticipate what they're going to look for. Now, this is a process that you should be doing, or you and your very top people in the dealership should be doing. Don't leave it up to the people handling the records on the day-to-day basis to handle this for you. You need to have someone separate and above them that does this internal audit. The dealer principal themselves is ultimately the one person ultimately responsible here. I highly recommend dealers do these self-audits. It allows you to identify and correct issues that you don't realize that you have. And that was one of the biggest problems, is we would have an auditor come in and we thought we had the strong compliance management system and we were doing so many things right. unfortunately, violations can arise even when you're getting the job done 99% correct. That 1% error rate can be a major issue in some compliance audits. And so this allows you to be sensitive to the blind spots that you do have in your operation, things that you don't see that are going on, and allows you to identify and correct these issues before the real auditor arrives and the real compliance costs start to accrue in attorney's fees, consultant fees, and potentially regulatory fines and fees. With that, it's been another episode of Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Check out our podcast on all our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X.
Thank you for listening. Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers, is a production of Meta Financial Services Incorporated.